Comment on this from Nigel Farage. He is a Fox News contributor. It just happens to be in New York on this very day and had just been listening to this breaking news. Your reaction, please, Nigel, because, look, you're all about immigration. That's what you do. That's what you're based on, frankly. And now we have the president under great pressure, and he's got a fix.
Yeah, but he says, look, I'm a parent, I understand the problems, this doesn't look good. He will say, we are not retreating one bit on being tough on illegal immigration coming into America, but we're just looking for a more humane solution. And I think with that, the criticism he's getting from his own side will cease. I reckon this is the smart thing to do. OK, now talk to me about Europe, because Angela Merkel, she's under great pressure. She could lose her job as Chancellor. She could. She's got 2 weeks to try and fix something. I mean, basically, Merkel has always wanted immigration and asylum policy to be determined at the Brussels European Union level. Increasingly, governments in Hungary, Italy and elsewhere are saying we want things done at a national level. There is a new rebel party in Germany called the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland. They're near 20% of the polls. They're putting massive pressure on the Bavarian Conservatives, where they have elections coming up in October. And frankly, unless Merkel backs down completely on what she said 3 years ago, namely anyone can come, unless she backs down completely, she'll be gone before the end of the summer.
What about a parallel with the United States? Because there's a rush coming to, it's there already, 50,000 arrests per month in the last 3 months, each month. There's a rush coming. What are we going to do?
Immigration is reshaping politics all over the Western world. Brexit would not have happened without it. Salvini and the Five Star would not have succeeded in Italy without campaigning on this issue. Trump, to a very large extent, got a lot of people out there voting for him because he was going to be tough on dealing with legal and illegal immigration into America. I tell you what, those numbers coming to America are looking pretty worrying. He needs to build a wall.
Yes, he does indeed, but that's going to take a little bit of time.
I know.
But the humanitarians are going to say, oh, you've got to let him in. You've got to let him in. It's the human thing. This is America, the United States of America. You've got to let him in.
Do you know, in Europe, since 2014, 1,000 people have been killed or maimed by people claiming refugee status coming into Europe. If that's not a lesson for why you've got to be careful about who you let in, I don't know what is.
Who wins politically? When you've got this crush at our southern border, you've got the debate, let them in or keep them out. Who wins politically on that? Do you think American sentiment is humanitarian, let them in, we'll take care of them? No, you don't?
No, that's what the liberal media think. That's what most people sitting in Congress think. You go out into middle America, go into middle England for that matter, and you speak to people and they've had enough of weak immigration policies. They're concerned about their security, they're concerned about terrorism, and in Trump they've got a president that speaks for them. He must not weaken on immigration. If he does, he'll find turnout at the midterms from some of his base will not be as good as he needs. He's got to stay tough.
Last one. America withdraws from the UN Human Rights Council. You've got a big fat smile on your face.
I love it. Nikki Haley, isn't she fantastic? I mean, you know, calling it a cesspool. Look, the whole thing is bloated, they're overpaid, they're hypocrites. On that council, purporting to stand for human rights, are regimes who behave appallingly towards their own people. They're deeply prejudiced against Israel. And it's about time somebody called out the UN. I love it.
You know, if you're a visitor from Mars and you watch this programme, you think you're watching the BBC. You don't get opinions like that expressed on the BBC.
I'm not allowed on, no. No, I am allowed on the BBC, but shall we say they use me very sparingly.
Well, we're glad to see you with us, Nigel Farage.
Thank you very much.
And indeed, Mr Cameron changed the draft of his speech a couple of months ago on this very issue. What I expect to see are some cosmetic concessions, perhaps the Germans agreeing that maybe child benefit should not be paid to children living in other parts of Europe. But even if Mr Cameron later on today stands on the steps of Downing Street and says this is a great victory, it still won't work because the polls have made it clear they will veto it anyway. I do not believe that the British people can be bought off with anything less than the red line of us being able to control who does and does not come into our country. And unless the British Prime Minister can get a concession on the free movement of people, I do not believe in a referendum the British people would vote for us to remain members. I think that even the Germans and the European Central Bank are now beginning to realise that it's politically impossible for Greece to remain members of the euro. So they are preparing themselves for the first member to break away and comforting themselves that if it's Greece, that's fine. It'll just be Greece and nobody else. You only have to look at what is happening in Spain and in Italy, with very large protest movements, with now half of the voters in Italy voting for parties that want to leave the euro or want a fundamental renegotiation of their terms, to understand that the euro is doomed. And thank goodness we didn't listen to many in Westminster, and we didn't join.
Well, joining me now is the UKIP leader, Nigel Farage. I mean, let me put it to you, this is all just a bit of pre-referendum negotiation. Mrs. Merkel just setting out her position.
There is no negotiation. You know, I've spent over 15 years in the European Parliament, working in Brussels, and I can tell you there is a unanimity of view that these treaties are not to be unpicked in any way at all, and that the free movement of people is considered to be one of the most important elements of the European Union. The only country in Europe in which our politicians pretend there can be an a la carte menu is here in Britain, in Westminster. It's not possible. And so Mr Cameron was pushed, I think, by UKIP's success in Clacton, into extending his renegotiating position into saying we should renegotiate free movement. It isn't going to happen.
But let me put it to you, this is all bluff. At the end of the day, Germany would be deeply reluctant to see Britain leave the EU because it wants a country of similar political outlook inside the European Union. So they don't want us to leave.
My experience of Brussels politics is that the Germans don't bluff. They're very straightforward. They really do say what they think. And Mrs Merkel would rather Britain left the European Union than those treaties started to be unpicked. Once that process begins, the European project is finished, and she knows that.
We hear now, though, that Mr Cameron may try a different sort of approach, trying to stretch the existing rules as far as they possibly could go, saying perhaps that EU migrants coming here would have to have a job. Now, he could get a deal on that.
Mr Cameron will try and fiddle around at the edges. What he will not be able to do is to change the basic principle that nearly 500 million people, if they want, can come to this country. That isn't going to change. He'll fiddle around the edges and actually finish up satisfying neither side.
Thank you, Mr. Tericabras. Now for 3 minutes we have Mr. Farage.
We're embarked upon a course of almost unbelievable stupidity. The historic error made by Chancellor Merkel last year by saying all can come has led directly to this mess. And now we're being blackmailed by Turkey. First they came for 3 billion in a promise to reduce the numbers coming in to Greece and the rest of Europe. And of course, when the numbers increased many-fold, they came back for another 3 billion. And they will keep on coming back for more and more and more. As the British poet Rudyard Kipling observed of the Danish incursions into England. And that is called paying the Danegeld. But we proved it again and again that if once you have paid him the Danegeld, you'll never get rid of the Dane. And now they've got us over a barrel. This new deal, where for every one illegal migrant we send back, if our human rights laws allow it, they'll send us another one back from Syria. So the argument is, we paid them a fortune not to reduce numbers, and yet we've given in and we've said visa-free access for 75 million Turks from June of this year. In theory, they can stay for 90 days. In practice, many will disappear or, of course, claim family reunion. The numbers will go sharply up. And in return for all of this, we're now going to fast-track Turkey as a full member of the European Union. My goodness me, I wish that David Cameron was as good at negotiations as the Turks are. So we're going to go into political union with a country that's got borders with Iraq, Iran and Syria. We're going to go into political union with a country that is poorer than anybody else in the European Union and give free movement for 75 people, and join up with a government that is increasingly Islamist and authoritarian. The Turkish Prime Minister said this week, Turkish membership will be a turning point. Too right. The British Prime Minister has long supported Turkey being a member of this union. In fact, he's fought hard over 10 years for them to join. He doesn't bat an eyelid at the extra £500 million we will stump up to help fund this crisis. Well, this referendum in Britain is all about what is the safest option. And given that the boss of Europol says already there are 3,000 to 5,000 Islamist terrorists that have come into Europe using the migrant routes, it's pretty clear to me that a vote to remain is a vote for Turkey. A vote to remain is a vote for massively increased immigration into Britain, and a vote to remain is a vote that makes Britain more vulnerable to terrorism. Safer to vote to leave and take back control of our borders. Thank you.
Now, the German leader lost a crucial vote over the weekend. Her party is due to have the same fate next weekend. Similar populist rages are building in Portugal and Italy and France. And some are calling it a Donald Trumpian rage, that the world is going the way of let's protect our borders, something that has been a cornerstone of former UK Independence Party leader Nigel Farage, who joins us right now. Nigel, good to have you.
Good to be here and welcome back.
And thank you for your very kind note, Nigel. I appreciate that. Let me ask you about what's going on here, because there's something in the global well, not just in the United States, but you've astutely picked up on this trend years ago, whether people agree or disagree with you. But I think the Merkel pounding jeopardizes her very leadership, and for that matter, the German leadership of Europe. What's going on?
Well, let's get a sense of context here. I mean, there's been opposition growing over the course of the last few years to the whole direction that global politics, global corporate politics, has been going in. And what Brexit has done is to give inspiration to absolutely everybody who believes in nation-state democracy, controlling their borders and putting the interests of their own people first. And I see, you know, a big parallel with what's happening in Germany with Brexit, but equally, you know, I was over a couple of weeks ago in Jacksonville, Mississippi. You know, I was at that Trump rally, and I met those people afterwards, and those people in Mississippi felt exactly the same as the people who voted for Brexit and the people who came out and gave Angela Merkel such a bloody nose at the weekend. You know, what we're asking for is portrayed by the international media elites and business elites and political elites as if we're bad people advocating something extreme and dangerous. We're not. We're asking for normality, and normal countries control their borders and look after their citizens.
That does seem to be the trend, but it does invite the wrath of the United Nations, the human rights chief recently slamming you and Donald Trump for using what they've been calling ISIS-style propaganda. What do you make of it?